Have you ever felt that chill that runs up your spine for no apparent reason, that unsettling silence before something terrible reveals itself? I felt it the exact moment I stepped into that abandoned mosque in Istanbul, but I didn't know what awaited me yet. Something was already watching me from the shadows. This is a true story that happened to me, Ahmad al-Rashid, a student of Islamic theology at Al-Azhar University. An experience that may shake you to your core, but if you stay until the end by Allah's grace, it might strengthen your faith like never before. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It was the autumn of 2019, and I had just arrived in Istanbul for an academic exchange program. At 23 years old, I carried the weight of being considered one of the best students of Islamic jurisprudence in my class in Cairo. My professors had great expectations. My family placed pride in me, but internally I struggled with doubts I would never dare confess. The long nights of study at Istanbul University's library left me exhausted. I lived alone in a small apartment in the historic district of Fatih, near the ancient Ottoman mosques. Loneliness began to weigh on me, and I admit that my spiritual discipline had relaxed. Morning prayers became sporadic, the evening dhikr frequently forgotten due to study fatigue. It was in this state of spiritual vulnerability that I received the invitation that would change my life forever. Dr. Mehmet Özkan, my Turkish supervisor, a man with a graying beard and penetrating eyes, called me to his office on a grey November afternoon. Golden leaves danced outside the window as he observed me with a grave expression. "Ahmad," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I need your help with a special project. There's a 16th century mosque in the Eyüp district that's being restored. They found ancient manuscripts hidden in the walls, and we need someone with your knowledge of classical Arabic to decipher them." I should have felt honored by the trust placed in me, but something in his tone caused me unease. "Professor, when would we need to start?" "Tomorrow night. The work must be done after prayer hours, so as not to interfere with the faithful." He paused, observing my expression. "Ahmad, there's something else. The mosque, it has a peculiar history. Some local residents report unusual experiences there." My heart accelerated, but I tried to maintain academic composure. "What kind of experiences, Professor?" "Strange voices during dawn prayers, objects that move by themselves, sensations of invisible presence." He sighed deeply. "I am a man of science, Ahmad, but I am also a Muslim. Sometimes there are things our reason cannot completely explain." At that moment, I should have refused. I should have listened to the instinct that warned me, but academic pride spoke louder. "I accept, Professor. When should I be there?" The Sultan Mahmud Mosque rose like a ghostly silhouette against Istanbul's night sky. Its domes and minarets, partially covered by restoration scaffolding, created distorted shadows under the dim streetlight. I had arrived at 10 p.m., carrying my backpack with dictionaries, magnifying glasses, and notebooks. The caretaker, an elderly man named Mustafa Bey, received me at the side entrance. His eyes avoided mine as he unlocked the heavy wooden door. "May Allah protect you, young man," he murmured, handing me a lantern. "Don't stay too late, and always maintain wudu." His words seemed strange at the time, but I simply thanked him and entered. The mosque's interior was plunged in semi-darkness. My lantern partially revealed the marble pillars, the carefully arranged prayer rugs, and the ornate mihrab indicating the direction of Mecca. The air smelled of ancient incense and something else, something I couldn't identify. The manuscripts had been discovered inside a wall near the pulpit. The hole in the masonry was still open, revealing a secret niche that had remained sealed for centuries. The parchments, yellowed by time, contained texts in archaic Arabic mixed with Ottoman Turkish terms. As I worked, carefully translating each line, I began to realize these weren't common religious texts. They were accounts of encounters with the Djinn. "In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate," read the first manuscript, "I record here the extraordinary events I witnessed in this house of prayer in the year 963 of the Hijra." My concentration was broken by a sound, an almost imperceptible whisper echoing through the mosque's columns. I stopped writing and listened carefully. Silence. I returned to work, but the sound returned. This time, clearer. Someone, or something, was reciting verses from the Quran in a voice that wasn't completely human. I rose slowly, holding the lantern in front of me. "Assalamu alaikum," I called into the darkness. "Is anyone there?" The recitation stopped abruptly. That's when I saw it. A figure stood near the mihrab, partially hidden by shadows. It was tall, wore a dark tunic, and its eyes glowed with their own light, like embers in the darkness. My heart raced. Instinctively, I began to recite, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitan ar-rajim." The figure didn't move, but its voice echoed through the mosque with supernatural clarity. "Fear not, O student of knowledge. I too am a servant of Allah." That first night in the mosque left me in a state of total confusion. When the figure disappeared, literally dissolved into the shadows like smoke, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the tired mind. Perhaps a hallucination caused by study stress and the somber atmosphere of the place. But the manuscripts I continued translating in the following nights told similar stories. The Imam who wrote them in the 16th century reported regular encounters with beings who identified themselves as Muslim Djinn, entities that frequented the mosque to hear recitations and participate in prayers. "They are like shadows that take form when they desire," wrote the Imam. "Some are devout believers, others carry evil in their hearts. Constant dhikr is our only protection." Each night I spent in the mosque, strange events multiplied. Objects changed places by themselves. My dictionaries appeared organized differently. Pens disappeared and reappeared in impossible locations. The air sometimes became heavy, charged with an invisible presence that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Worse still, I began to hear conversations, whispers in archaic Arabic coming from empty corners of the mosque, discussions about subjects I was studying, as if invisible entities were commenting on my work. Once I clearly heard a female voice say, "He doesn't maintain dhikr regularly, he's vulnerable." My spiritual discipline, already fragile, began to deteriorate even more. Constant fear made me avoid long prayers. I rushed through the obligatory supplications and completely neglected voluntary prayers and morning and evening dhikr. That's when she appeared. It was my 5th night in the mosque when I saw her clearly for the first time. I was bent over a particularly difficult manuscript when I felt a presence approaching. I raised my eyes and saw her sitting on the other side of the table, as if she had always been there. She was a woman of indescribable beauty. Her hair, black as night, contrasted with skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Her eyes, deep green like emeralds, observed me with an intensity that made my heart accelerate. She wore clothes that seemed to float around her body, as if made of liquid silk. "You are studying our history," she said, her melodious voice echoing softly through the empty mosque. I should have fled. I should have recited the protections I learned since childhood, but her beauty was hypnotizing, and her presence emanated a serenity that calmed my fears. "You are—" I began, but the words died in my throat. "I am Layla," she replied with a smile that illuminated her face. "And you are—" "Ahmad. I have been observing your work. Your dedication to knowledge is admirable." At that moment, a rational part of my mind screamed warnings, but another part, perhaps influenced by weeks of loneliness and stress, felt grateful for the company. "Do you frequent this mosque?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "For centuries," she replied simply. "This is my home as much as your university is yours." We spent hours talking. Layla demonstrated deep knowledge of the Quran, cited hadiths with impressive precision, and discussed Islamic jurisprudence with sophistication that rivaled my professors. She helped me decipher particularly obscure passages from the manuscripts, offering insights I would never have reached alone. When Fajr approached, she rose gracefully. "I must go now, but I will return tomorrow, if you desire my company." "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Please, come back." She smiled once more and simply vanished, as if she had never been there. The following weeks transformed into a surreal mixture of terror and fascination. Layla appeared every night, always punctual, always beautiful, always knowledgeable. Our friendship deepened with conversations that extended until the first lights of morning. She told me stories of the invisible world, the Alam al-Ghaib, with details that left me simultaneously marveled and uneasy. She spoke of entire cities inhabited by Djinn, of their own mosques and schools, of complex societies parallel to humanity. "You humans believe you are the only ones created with intelligence and free will," she said, her green eyes shining in the lantern light. "But we have existed much longer. We were created from smokeless fire while you came from clay." My fascination grew with each encounter, but so did my spiritual guilt. I had practically abandoned my regular prayers, justifying that I was busy with important research. Morning and evening dhikr had become a distant memory. Even the basic protection recitation that every Muslim learns in childhood, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, rarely crossed my lips. It was on a particularly cold December night that everything changed. Layla arrived later than usual, and I noticed a subtle change in her appearance. Her green eyes seemed more intense, almost luminous, and her skin had an ethereal quality I hadn't noticed before. When she sat down, I felt a wave of heat that contrasted with the mosque's cold. "Ahmad," she said, her voice carrying a seriousness that hadn't been present in our previous encounters, "I need to tell you something important." My heart accelerated. "What is it?" She remained silent for a long moment, as if carefully choosing her words. Finally, her eyes met mine. "I am not human." The words hung in the air like a sentence. I knew on some deep level that this moment would come. The signs were all there. Her sudden appearances and disappearances, her impossible knowledge, the way objects around her seemed to behave strangely. "You are," I began, but she completed the sentence. "I am a Jinni, from the clan of believers, a follower of Islam, but still not human." The world seemed to stop. My breathing became heavy, and I felt a cold that pierced to the bone. All the lessons of my childhood about Djinn returned like an avalanche. Creatures of fire, some good, others malevolent, all powerful beyond human comprehension. "Why are you telling me this?" I murmured, my voice almost a whisper. Layla leaned forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because I have fallen in love with you, Ahmad, and I want you to marry me." The words hit my mind like lightning. Marriage to a Jinni. Was this possible? Was it permitted in Islam? 1,000 questions raced through my head, but only one managed to come out. How would this work? "There are precedents," she said softly. "King Sulaiman, peace be upon him, had wives among the Jinn. There are accounts in ancient texts, stories that your scholars prefer to treat as legends, but which are real." She extended her hand toward me. The moment our fingers touched, I felt an electric current run through my entire body. It was a sensation different from any human touch, warm, intense, almost magical. "Think about it," she whispered. "I can show you marvels that no human has ever seen. Together, we can study knowledge that is beyond earthly books. I can give you a life of adventures between two worlds." When she disappeared that night, I was left alone with thoughts that would torment me for the next few days. Part of me was terrified by the revelation. Another part, the one that had felt lonely and isolated in Istanbul, seriously considered her proposal. The following days were the most turbulent of my life. I couldn't concentrate on studies, on prayers, on anything but Layla's impossible proposal. Marriage to a Jinni. Was this madness or a unique opportunity? I began researching obsessively in Islamic texts, looking for precedents, legal opinions, any guidance on relationships between humans and Jinn. The results were confusing and contradictory. Some scholars mentioned it was theoretically possible, but extremely dangerous. Others condemned it completely. My physical appearance began to reflect my mental state. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes and my beard became disheveled. University colleagues began asking questions about my health, but I couldn't explain the truth. It was during this week of internal torment that I received a call that would change everything. "Ahmad?" The voice on the other end of the line was familiar but distant. "This is Sheikh Yusuf al-Maliki, from the Islamic Institute of Cairo. Your professor, Dr. Özkan, told me about your work with the ancient manuscripts." Sheikh Yusuf was a legend in the Islamic academic world, a scholar of ruqya and spiritual phenomena, known for his wisdom and experience with the invisible world. "Sheikh, it's an honor to receive your call," I replied, trying to hide the nervousness in my voice. "My son, I heard troubling rumors about strange events in the mosque where you're working. Dr. Özkan mentioned that you seem disturbed lately." My heart raced. Did he know? "I need you to be completely honest with me, Ahmad. Have you had encounters with non-human entities during your work?" The direct question caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to deny, keep the secret. But something in the Sheikh's wise and compassionate voice made me break. "Yes," I admitted in a low voice. "I encountered a Jinni." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Ahmad," Sheikh Yusuf said finally, his voice laden with paternal concern, "you are in great danger. I need to travel to Istanbul immediately. Until I arrive, I want you to do some very important things." He began giving me detailed instructions. "Immediately resume the 5 daily prayers, recite morning and evening dhikr without fail, read Ayat al-Kursi before sleeping, and most importantly, avoid any additional contact with the entity. But Sheikh, I interrupted, she says she's Muslim. She recites the Quran, knows the Hadith. My son, his voice became more serious. Iblis knows the Quran better than many humans, but that doesn't make him less dangerous. Knowledge without true submission to Allah is a trap. His words struck like an arrow to the heart. I had allowed myself to be seduced not only by Layla's beauty, but by her knowledge, forgetting the basic warnings about Djinn that I learned since childhood. Sheikh, she asked me to marry her, I confessed, feeling like a child admitting a terrible mischief. The silence that followed was even longer than the previous one. Ahmad, Sheikh Yusuf said finally, his voice now charged with urgency, you must end this relationship immediately, and you must do it tonight before it's too late. Why? What can happen? Marriages between humans and Djinn rarely end well for the human. In the best case, you would gradually lose your humanity. In the worst, well, I prefer not to think about the worst case. That night I returned to the mosque with a heavy heart and fragile determination. I knew I needed to confront Layla, but I also knew how difficult it would be to resist her influence when she was before me. She arrived as always, materializing from the shadows with her radiant beauty. But this time I noticed details I had ignored before, how her feet didn't completely touch the ground, how her breath didn't create vapor in the mosque's cold air, how her presence made candle flames flicker without any wind. Ahmad, she said, approaching with a warm smile, have you thought about my proposal? I swallowed hard and forced the words out. Layla, I cannot accept. Her expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of surprise that quickly transformed into something darker. Why not? Her voice was still melodious, but there was an underlying note of danger. I am human. You are Jinni. We are from different worlds. It cannot work. Layla's green eyes became more intense, glowing with their own light. Ahmad, you don't understand. I'm not making a request. It's a command. That's when I felt the first real taste of terror. Layla's transformation was terrifying to witness. Her ethereal beauty distorted, revealing something much older and more powerful behind the seductive facade. Her green eyes now burned like embers, and her voice acquired impossible harmonics, as if multiple voices spoke in unison. You think you can simply reject me? She roared, and her form began to grow, projecting gigantic shadows on the mosque's walls. I spent weeks cultivating you, preparing you. You abandoned your prayers, neglected your dhikr, became vulnerable. Now you are mine. The air around her began to undulate like desert heat, and objects in the mosque began moving by themselves. Books flew from shelves, prayer rugs writhed like snakes, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with malignant life. Instinctively I began to recite, A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. Layla laughed, a sound that echoed through the mosque like breaking glass. Your empty words have no power over me. You abandoned Allah and Allah abandoned you. But I continued reciting, now advancing to Ayat al-Kursi, Allah, La ilaha illa hu, al-hayy al-qayyum. Her reaction was immediate and violent. She screamed as if the words were liquid fire being poured over her, and her form began to oscillate between the beautiful woman and something much more monstrous. Stop, she commanded, extending a hand in my direction. I felt an invisible force trying to close my throat, preventing the words from coming out. It was in this moment of despair that I remembered Sheikh Yusuf's instructions. I began to recite the morning dhikr I had neglected for weeks. Bismillahilladhi, la yadurru ma ismihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama'i, wa huwa as-sami'ul alim. In the name of Allah, with whose name nothing on earth or in the heavens can cause harm, and He is the all-hearing, the all-knowing. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Layla recoiled as if she had been physically struck, her form becoming less solid. Impossible, she hissed. You haven't recited this for weeks. How can it have power now? But I continued, repeating the dhikr 3 times as I had learned in childhood, and with each repetition, I felt a strength growing within me. Not my own strength, but something much greater, a divine protection I had forgotten I possessed. Allah's protection does not completely abandon those who return to Him, said a new voice echoing through the mosque. I turned and saw Sheikh Yusuf standing at the entrance, his simple clothes contrasting with the spiritual authority emanating from him. I don't know how he had arrived in Istanbul so quickly, but his presence brought immediate calm to the supernatural chaos. Layla turned to him, her eyes now burning with pure hatred. You, always interfering, always protecting the weak. I'm not protecting anyone, Sheikh Yusuf replied calmly, walking toward us without showing fear. I'm simply reminding this young man of the power he has always possessed. He turned to me. Ahmad, continue the dhikr, and add the dua your parents taught you for protection against jinn. With trembling hand I recited, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min hamazat ash-shayatin wa a'udhu bika rabbi an yahdurun. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from the temptations of demons, and I seek refuge in you, my Lord, that they may not approach me. Layla emitted a scream that seemed to pierce not only my ears, but my very soul. Her beautiful form dissolved completely, revealing something from nightmares, shadows with burning eyes and a presence that sucked the very light around it. You will pay for this, Ahmad, she screamed, her voice now completely inhuman. All of you will pay. But even as she threatened, she began to fade. The protection invoked by the prayers was working, forcing her to retreat. Sheikh Yusuf approached me and placed a paternal hand on my shoulder. Continue reciting, my son. Don't stop until she disappears completely. Together we remained in the mosque reciting dhikr and protective du'as until the last shadow of Layla dissipated into the night. The silence that followed was deep and purifying, as if the mosque itself sighed with relief. In the weeks following the confrontation with Layla, my life changed in ways I could never have imagined. Sheikh Yusuf remained in Istanbul for a few more days, guiding me through a process of spiritual purification and healing. My son, he explained during one of our long conversations, you were lucky. Many who get involved with jinn cannot free themselves so easily. Your Islamic education, even when weakened, provided the necessary foundations for your salvation. I learned that my experience was not unique. Sheikh Yusuf had dealt with similar cases throughout his career. Students, intellectuals, people who gradually distanced themselves from their basic spiritual practices and became vulnerable to influences from the invisible world. Morning and evening dhikr are not just rituals, he taught me. They are spiritual shields. When we neglect them, we become visible to malevolent jinn like a house with open doors. I resumed my spiritual practices with a discipline I had never had before. The 5 daily prayers became anchors in my routine, sacred moments that nothing could interrupt. Morning and evening dhikr became as natural as breathing. More importantly, I completed the translation of the ancient manuscripts with a new perspective. The 16th century Imam's accounts now made complete sense. He wasn't just recording curious encounters, he was documenting warnings for future generations. May this record serve as a reminder, he had written in his final pages, that Allah's protection is always available to those who seek it sincerely, but must be maintained through constant remembrance and submission. My academic work took a new direction. Instead of focusing only on theoretical jurisprudence, I began studying ruqya and spiritual protection. I wanted to help others who might face similar situations. Dr. Özkan noticed the change in me. Ahmad, he said during a meeting, you seem different, more mature, more centered. I went through some experiences that taught me the value of spiritual discipline, I replied simply. He smiled, a smile that suggested he might know more about my experience than he had initially let on. The Sultan Mahmud Mosque was officially reopened after completion of restoration work. I was present at the first Friday prayer after reopening, watching hundreds of faithful fill the space that had been the stage of so much personal terror. During the khutbah, the Imam spoke about the importance of spiritual protection in Islam. Brothers and sisters, his voice echoed through the restored columns, we live in a world where the visible and invisible meet. Our protection does not come from amulets or superstitious rituals, but from constant remembrance of Allah and maintaining our spiritual obligations. His words echoed in my heart, like a divine confirmation of everything I had learned. After prayer, I walked through the restored mosque's interior. The marble pillars shone with new life, the carpets exhaled the smell of cleanliness and renewal, and natural light entered through newly cleaned windows, banishing the shadows that once harbored terror. I stopped at the exact spot where I had sat that first fateful night, where the manuscripts had been discovered. A commemorative plaque now marked the location, briefly mentioning the historical discovery. But I knew the true story, the real lesson contained in those ancient scrolls, was much deeper than any visitor could imagine. Months later, when I returned to Cairo to complete my studies, I took with me not only academic knowledge, but lived wisdom that no book could have taught me. Sheikh Yusuf became not only an academic mentor, but a spiritual guide who helped me integrate this experience into my faith in a healthy way. What you lived, he told me during our last conversation in Istanbul, was both a trial and a blessing. Allah allowed you to experience danger so you could truly appreciate the protection He offers. Today, years after those events in Istanbul, I am a professor of Islamic studies at a university in Cairo. My specialty, spiritual protection and ruqya in contemporary Islam. Students sometimes find my insistence on the importance of daily dhikr curious, but I know from personal experience that it's not about superstition or empty tradition. Every morning, without fail, I recite, Bismillahi alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama'i, wa huwa as-sami'ul alim, 3 times as my parents taught me in childhood, and every night before sleeping, I read Ayat al-Kursi and the last 3 surahs of the Quran. It's not fear that motivates me, it's gratitude. Gratitude for having learned in the most dramatic way possible that Allah's protection is not something we should take for granted. I frequently receive students who report strange experiences, sensations of presence, disturbing dreams, inexplicable encounters. Some come to me skeptical, thinking everything is psychological. Others arrive terrified, convinced they are lost. To both groups, my message is the same. The invisible world is real, but so is the protection that Allah offers to every sincere Muslim. Dhikr is not just remembrance, it's a shield. Prayers are not just ritual, they are fortress. I never saw Layla again, but sometimes on particularly silent nights, I feel a familiar presence watching from afar. In those moments, I simply recite my dhikr and the sensation disappears. It's not confrontation, it's remembrance. Remembrance that my protection is secure as long as I maintain my connection with the one who created both the visible and invisible worlds. The manuscripts I translated in that mosque in Istanbul were later published as part of an academic collection on spiritual experiences in Ottoman Islam. But the true publication, the lesson that really matters, is being written in the lives of those who hear this story and take its central message to heart. To every student I guide, to every person seeking help with spiritual matters, I repeat the words Sheikh Yusuf told me that transformative night in Istanbul. Allah's protection is always available, but must be maintained through constant remembrance and submission. This is not a story to frighten, it's a story to strengthen. It's not a tale to create paranoia. It's a testimony to the power of faith maintained with sincerity. If you've made it this far, I ask you to do one thing. Don't let this story end with me. Share it with someone who needs to remember the power of dhikr. Teach your children the importance of morning and evening prayers. Keep alive the tradition of spiritual protection that our ancestors bequeathed to us. And remember, in a world where the visible and invisible constantly meet, our strength is not in amulets or complicated rituals. It lies in the sublime simplicity of constantly remembering Allah, of keeping our hearts connected to the Creator of all worlds. May Allah protect all of us from visible and invisible dangers. May He keep our feet firm on the straight path. And may this experience serve as a reminder that His protection is never distant from those who seek it sincerely. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min hamazat ash-shayatin wa a'udhu bika rabbi an yahdurun. O Allah, I seek refuge in You from the temptations of demons, and I seek refuge in You, my Lord, that they may not approach me. Every time you recite these words, remember this story. Remember that you carry within yourself the power to ward off any evil that might threaten you, not through your own strength, but through the strength of the one who created both light and darkness, and who gave believers the tools to protect themselves from both. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah al-Azim. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon all of you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.